The man had always dreamed of owning a home, a place that was truly his own. He worked hard for years, saving every penny from his modest military salary, taking extra shifts and living frugally to make this dream a reality. Finally, the day came when he could sign the papers and walk through the door of a house that was entirely his. It wasn't a mansion or a fancy property, but it was perfect to him. Every corner of it spoke of hope, security, and a future he could call his own. He spent days and weeks getting the house ready. The walls were painted in warm colors, and the small garden outside was filled with flowers he carefully planted himself. He could imagine sitting on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun dip below the horizon while the wind whispered through the trees. It was peaceful, a sharp contrast to the loud, chaotic life he often led in the military. Life was going well. His neighbors were friendly, and the small community felt welcoming. There were occasional meetings with the Homeowners Association, or HOA, which were always polite and professional. At first, everything seemed fine. They reminded residents of rules, regulations, and community standards. He paid attention to every notice, every guideline, because he wanted to be a responsible homeowner. He didn't mind following rules if it meant living in a well-kept and peaceful neighborhood. Then the call came. He was needed for deployment overseas. It was not unusual for him. Serving the country was part of his life, and he had always answered the call without hesitation. He made arrangements to leave the house in good hands. He asked a trusted friend to check on it while he was gone. He made sure his bills were set up for automatic payment, and he kept a folder of all the HOA rules and correspondence, thinking that being organized would prevent any problems. He left with confidence. While the thought of being away from home for months was heavy, he trusted that everything would be fine. He pictured returning home after the deployment, the house just as he left it, maybe even improved by the care of his friend and neighbors. He focused on his duties, but his mind often wandered to the house, wondering if the flowers in the garden had bloomed or if the small repairs he had made were holding up. Weeks turned into months. His days were filled with long hours, drills, and responsibilities, but he always made time to check on his house whenever he could. Calls were limited and letters took time, but he sent updates to his friend and hoped for the best. The world he had left behind felt far away, but his home remained a source of comfort in his thoughts. Then one day, he received an unexpected letter from the HOA. It was marked urgent, and the words inside made his heart sink. The HOA claimed there were multiple violations, fines that had accumulated, and a threat of legal action if he did not respond immediately. He was confused and angry. He had followed the rules, paid his dues, and trusted the system to protect him. How could this be happening while he was serving the country? He tried to contact the HOA immediately, but the time difference and limited communication made it almost impossible. Every call went unanswered, and emails seemed to disappear into a void. He asked his friend to check on the property, hoping it was a misunderstanding. But the friend reported that the situation was worse than expected. Notices had piled up, warnings were ignored, and the HOA had taken steps to seize the property. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. They were trying to take away the place he had worked so hard for, the place that meant everything to him. Days became nights filled with frustration and worry. He was thousands of miles away, wearing a uniform, carrying out duties for his country, and yet, back home, his home was under threat. He felt powerless, trapped by circumstances beyond his control. The betrayal burned inside him. How could people entrusted with fairness, with the responsibility to manage a community, act in such a way? It didn't make sense. The anger mixed with anxiety, and he found it hard to focus on anything else. He reached out to a lawyer, explaining the situation and hoping for a solution. The lawyer said it would be complicated, that the HOA had followed certain procedures, but there were loopholes that could be exploited. It was not a guarantee, but at least it was a glimmer of hope. Every night after exhausting days of duty, he would lie awake thinking about the next steps, strategizing how he could protect his home, and hoping against hope that justice would prevail. His mind often wandered to the small joys he had felt in the house, the laughter with friends, quiet mornings with coffee on the porch, evenings spent reading under the soft light of a lamp he had chosen carefully. Those moments felt distant now, overshadowed by the looming threat. He clung to them in memory, finding strength in the thought that the house was more than just walls and a roof. It was a symbol of his hard work, his sacrifices, and his dreams. Meanwhile, back home, life seemed chaotic. The HOA continued its actions, sending more letters, increasing fines, and making aggressive moves to claim the property. Neighbors who once seemed friendly now looked at him with hesitation, unsure of how to react. His trusted friend did what they could to intervene, but the situation escalated beyond anyone's control. It became clear that the battle to protect the house would not be easy, and it would require more than just patience. Through it all, he remained determined. Serving his country gave him discipline, courage, and resilience, and he drew on these qualities to face the challenge. He wrote letters, kept detailed records, and made calls whenever possible, even though the time difference and limited access made it difficult. Every effort, no matter how small, was a step toward reclaiming what was rightfully his. He also began to reflect on what had happened. The sense of betrayal by the HOA made him more aware of the vulnerabilities homeowners could face, especially those who serve in the military. He realized that the laws and protections that were supposed to exist for service members could be complex and difficult to navigate. This awareness fueled his determination. He would not allow himself to be taken advantage of, and he would fight not just for himself but for the principle of fairness and justice. The nights were long, filled with thoughts of strategy and hope. He imagined the day he would return home and see his house untouched, restored, and safe. He pictured the HOA realizing the consequences of their actions, the satisfaction of justice being served, and the peace that would come with reclaiming his home. These visions kept him going even in the most challenging moments. In the midst of worry and uncertainty, he also found moments of gratitude. His friends' support was unwavering. Neighbors who offered advice and help reminded him that not everyone was against him, and small victories in paperwork or legal procedures gave him hope. These moments, though brief, provided a sense of balance in a situation that felt overwhelmingly unfair. The man understood that his journey was just beginning. The fight for his home would test him in ways he had never imagined. It would challenge his patience, his resilience, and his ability to navigate complex systems from afar. But he also knew that he was not someone who gave up easily. He had faced challenges before, on the battlefield and in life, and he was determined to face this one with the same courage and persistence. As the weeks passed, he kept his focus on both his duties and his home. Every letter, every phone call, every legal consultation was a thread in a web of strategy he was weaving. He imagined the moment when all the threads would come together, when justice would prevail, and when he would finally walk through the door of his house, knowing that he had fought for it every step of the way. He also began to share his story with fellow service members, finding solidarity and advice from those who had faced similar challenges. Their experiences provided insight, encouragement, and sometimes even humor, lightening the burden of worry. He realized that he was not alone, that others had faced injustices while serving their country and had found ways to overcome them. Even in the darkest moments, he held on to hope. He believed that the truth, combined with determination and support, would eventually lead to a resolution. The house was more than just a building. It was a testament to his efforts, a symbol of his dreams, and a reflection of his life's work. Losing it was not an option, and he was willing to fight in every way he could to protect it. Through the chaos, he remained disciplined, organized, and focused. He documented everything, prepared for every possible scenario, and stayed connected with legal advisors and friends who could help. Every action, no matter how small, was a step toward reclaiming his home and restoring the peace and security that had been threatened. By the end of his first part of the journey, he had already learned lessons about vigilance, resilience, and the importance of support networks. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but he was ready to face it. His heart remained tied to the house he loved, and his mind remained sharp and determined to see justice done. The stage was set for the battles to come, and he was prepared to fight with everything he had, holding on to the hope that one day he would return to the home that was rightfully his. He was stationed far from home, living a life that demanded discipline, focus, and constant attention to duty. The world he was in was full of structure, rules, and schedules, a place where every mistake could have serious consequences. Yet, despite the order around him, a storm was brewing back home, one he could barely influence from a distance. It began subtly at first. More letters arrived from the HOA, piling up in the friend's care. Notices of violations, fines, and warnings of impending legal action became a daily occurrence. The man's heart sank each time he learned of a new development. It was as though, while he was protecting the country, his own home was being slowly taken from him. The injustice felt personal, an invisible hand trying to snatch away the security he had built with his own sweat and savings. His friend tried to handle the situation, speaking with neighbors and the HOA, trying to make them understand that the homeowner was deployed and could not respond as quickly as someone living in the house. They hoped that this human connection, a simple explanation of circumstances, would be enough. But the HOA seemed unmoved, continuing with aggressive notices and threats. Each letter felt more like a battle cry, signaling that the organization was determined to take control, no matter the consequences. The man felt helpless. He could not physically be there to confront the issue. He could not stand in front of the officials or attend the hearings. He could only write letters, send emails, and make international phone calls when possible. Every effort was met with delays or dismissals. Sometimes it felt as though the rules of the world he had trusted no longer applied. It was a strange and painful contrast. He followed the rules of a structured military life to the letter. Yet here in his own home, the rules seemed to bend against him. At first, he tried to reason with the HOA directly. He wrote clear letters explaining his situation, attaching proof of deployment and asking for patience and understanding. Each letter was carefully crafted, polite yet firm. He wanted to show respect while standing up for his rights. But the responses were bureaucratic, impersonal, and sometimes threatening. It became clear that this was no longer a simple misunderstanding. It was a full-scale conflict. The fines were piling up quickly, and the threats of foreclosure became more serious. He tried to pay what he could, but the demands kept increasing, and the HOA seemed uninterested in any compromise. It was as if the rules they had once enforced for fairness were now being used as weapons. Each new notice was a reminder of how precarious his situation had become, and he realized that if he did not act decisively, he could lose the home he had worked so hard to own. Meanwhile, the military duties continued unabated. There were long days, exhausting exercises, and missions that left little room for personal concerns. Yet his mind often drifted back home. He imagined the house, the garden, and the rooms he had lovingly arranged. He thought of the porch where he had planned to sit with coffee in the mornings, the small living room filled with memories, and the quiet corners where he had imagined reading books after a long day. The thought that these could be lost was unbearable. His friend tried their best. They attended HOA meetings, took photographs of the property, and documented every notice and letter. They tried to advocate on his behalf, explaining that the homeowner was deployed and unable to respond personally. They pleaded for fairness, for understanding, and for patience. But the HOA was rigid, enforcing their rules with an unyielding hand. They seemed to view the homeowner's absence not as a circumstance to accommodate, but as an opportunity to assert control. The emotional toll was immense. Even while serving, he found himself unable to fully focus on his duties. He spent nights awake, drafting emails, making calls, and strategizing the next steps. The stress was constant, a shadow over every task and interaction. It was a difficult balance. He was committed to serving his country, yet his home was under threat, and he could not simply ignore it. He began researching laws and protections for deployed service members. He learned that there were rights intended to protect homeowners like him, laws that were supposed to prevent unfair treatment while someone was serving. It gave him hope, but also frustration. These laws existed, yet navigating them from thousands of miles away, with limited communication and constant military obligations, was nearly impossible. Every day felt like a race against an invisible clock, with the HOA gaining ground and time slipping away. Small victories were rare, but precious. Sometimes a letter would be delayed, a notice dismissed, or a fine reduced. Each one felt like a light in the darkness, a confirmation that persistence could pay off. But for every small win, there was another setback. A missed call, an unanswered email, a misfiled document. The battle was exhausting, both mentally and emotionally. Through it all, he clung to the reasons he had fought to own his home in the first place. It was more than just a building. It was a symbol of independence, stability, and hard work. Losing it would feel like losing a part of himself, the reward for years of sacrifice and diligence. He could not let it happen. This sense of personal justice became a driving force, motivating him to endure the frustration, the sleepless nights, and the endless obstacles. He also found solace in sharing the story with fellow service members. Some had faced similar challenges while deployed, and their advice, encouragement, and shared experiences were invaluable. They reminded him that he was not alone, that others had fought similar battles and found ways to prevail. These conversations offered both practical guidance and emotional support, helping him maintain his focus and determination. Back home, the community's reaction was mixed. Some neighbors supported him, sympathized with his situation, and tried to help. Others were wary, afraid of conflict or unwilling to confront the HOA. It was a delicate situation, and the man realized that alliances and support networks would play a critical role in the outcome. The friend he had entrusted with care of the property became a lifeline, navigating meetings, documenting events, and advocating on his behalf. As the situation escalated, he began considering more formal legal action. Consulting with lawyers familiar with military deployment cases became a necessity. They advised on rights, protections, and strategies for fighting back. It was a complicated process involving paperwork, evidence collection, and constant communication, all while he continued to serve in an environment that demanded full attention. Every step required patience, planning, and courage. Amidst the chaos, he held on to hope. Hope that fairness would prevail, that justice would be served, and that the home he had fought so hard to acquire would remain his. He imagined returning to a place intact where the walls echoed memories of hard work and dreams realized. These visions fueled his determination, helping him survive long days and sleepless nights filled with worry. He also reflected on the human side of the conflict. The HOA members were just people, he thought, perhaps misguided, perhaps overzealous, but capable of fairness if approached correctly. Yet the system itself seemed indifferent, favoring bureaucracy over compassion. Understanding this helped him focus on strategies that could work within the rules, rather than fighting emotion with emotion. It was a lesson in patience, in strategy, and in endurance. Every new notice from the HOA was met with a calculated response. He documented everything meticulously, creating a paper trail that could be used in legal proceedings. He relied on his friend to gather evidence, take photographs, and ensure that every detail was preserved. These efforts were small, but crucial steps in a battle that seemed endless. Despite the challenges, he refused to let despair take hold. Each day he reminded himself of the reasons he had chosen to fight, not only for the country but for his home, his dignity, and his sense of justice. This dual commitment created a powerful drive, a determination to face adversity without giving in to fear or frustration. Through months of struggle, the man learned more than just legal strategies or bureaucratic procedures. He learned resilience, patience, and the value of trusted allies. He discovered an inner strength that helped him endure challenges that seemed insurmountable. The experience, while painful and exhausting, also deepened his understanding of himself and the importance of standing up for what is right, no matter the obstacles. As the first phase of the battle drew on, he remained vigilant, hopeful, and determined. The letters from the HOA continued to arrive, but he was ready. He had a plan, support, and the courage to fight. The house he had built with his own hands, filled with dreams and memories, was worth every effort. And though he could not be there physically, his presence in spirit, through careful planning, communication, and legal action, remained unyielding. The man understood that the next stage of this struggle would demand even more ingenuity, persistence, and courage. The HOA's tactics might escalate and the obstacles would likely grow, but he was prepared to meet them. The fight for his home was not just about property. It was about fairness, justice, and standing up against those who would exploit the system. It was a battle worth every ounce of effort and every sleepless night. Through the highs and lows, moments of hope and despair, he never lost sight of the end goal. He would return home, and when he did, he wanted to reclaim the house that had been his sanctuary, his dream and his symbol. The man had never imagined that owning a home could become a battlefield of its own. He had devoted his life to serving his country, following orders and protecting others, and yet here he was, thousands of miles away, facing a fight he could barely control. The legal notices from the HOA were now arriving daily, each one more threatening than the last. He knew he had to act and fast to prevent the nightmare from becoming a reality. His first step was to retain a lawyer experienced in handling cases involving military personnel. The lawyer explained that while there were protections in place for deployed service members, navigating the bureaucracy from overseas would be challenging. The HOA had already taken aggressive steps, and any misstep on his part could give them the advantage. Every detail mattered. From missed deadlines to incomplete documentation, he realized that even a small error could be costly. He started gathering every piece of evidence he could: letters from the HOA, emails, receipts for payments, photographs of the house, and notes from his friend who was checking on the property became his arsenal. He organized them meticulously, creating a timeline of events that demonstrated his consistent effort to comply with regulations. This preparation was time-consuming, but it gave him a sense of control amidst the chaos. The lawyer advised that some battles could be won in court, but many could be settled through negotiation. They drafted letters emphasizing his deployment status, the unfairness of the fines, and the mistakes the HOA had made in following their own rules. Each communication was carefully worded to be firm yet respectful, aiming to show that the man was committed to resolving the situation without escalation if possible. Meanwhile, the man continued his military duties, balancing long hours, fatigue, and the stress of knowing his home was under threat. He would wake up before dawn, checking emails and responding to any new developments. In the evenings, he would spend hours on the phone with his friend and lawyer, reviewing documents and planning the next steps. Sleep was often elusive, and the worry gnawed at him relentlessly. Every new letter from the HOA brought a wave of frustration and anger. They seemed determined to assert control no matter the consequences. Fines were increasing, and the threats of legal action became more specific and intimidating. The man could almost feel the walls of his home closing in as the HOA pushed forward with their claims. He knew he could not allow fear to dominate him, but it was difficult to maintain calm when so much was at stake. Despite the mounting pressure, he found small victories that kept him going. Occasionally, the HOA would miss a deadline or fail to follow proper procedure, giving him an advantage. His lawyer would seize these opportunities, filing motions and letters to challenge the HOA's actions. These wins were minor, but they provided reassurance that the system could work in his favor if approached correctly. Each success, no matter how small, strengthened his resolve. The emotional toll was significant. He experienced moments of doubt, wondering if he could continue fighting from so far away. The idea of losing his home, the place he had worked so hard to secure, was unbearable. Yet he could not give in. He reminded himself that he had faced challenges before, both in the military and in life, and he had always found a way through. This belief became his anchor, helping him endure the long nights and difficult days. Communication with his friend became vital. They attended HOA meetings, took detailed notes, and made sure the man's voice was represented even in his absence. The friend provided updates on every development, photographing the house, noting any signs of deterioration or interference, and conveying the human side of the story to those involved. Their dedication was invaluable, giving him a lifeline and a sense of connection to the place he loved. The man also began to educate himself about HOA regulations and homeowners' rights. He discovered that many of the rules the HOA cited were being misapplied or enforced incorrectly. With this knowledge, he could challenge their claims more effectively, providing clear evidence that the fines and actions were unjustified. Every discovery was empowering, giving him tools to fight back and reinforcing his belief that perseverance could turn the tide. He also found support from fellow service members who had faced similar situations. They shared strategies, offered encouragement, and reminded him that he was not alone in this battle. Their stories of success provided hope, and their advice helped him navigate the legal and bureaucratic maze. These connections became a source of strength, offering both practical guidance and emotional reassurance. The battle with the HOA continued for weeks, each day presenting new challenges. Notices escalated, some with legal threats, others with sudden demands for payments he had already made. The man meticulously documented everything, knowing that each piece of evidence could be crucial in court. He relied on his military training, applying discipline, organization, and strategic thinking to what had become a complex legal struggle. As the legal proceedings began, he faced additional hurdles. Some HOA representatives were uncooperative, providing incomplete information or delaying responses. Each obstacle required patience and creative problem-solving. He learned to anticipate their moves, preparing counter-arguments and evidence in advance. The experience, though exhausting, sharpened his focus and reinforced his determination to protect what was rightfully his. Through it all, he maintained a connection to his home in his mind. He imagined walking through the rooms, seeing the familiar furniture and decorations, and feeling the warmth and security of a place that had always been his. These mental images provided comfort and motivation, reminding him why the fight was worth enduring. The house was more than property. It was a symbol of his efforts, dreams, and sacrifices. There were moments of despair. A miscommunication, a delayed response, or an unexpected legal twist could send him into a spiral of worry. But he refused to let these moments define the outcome. He relied on careful planning, advice from his lawyer, and the unwavering support of his friend. Each challenge became an opportunity to learn, adapt, and strengthen his position. The HOA, despite their aggressive stance, began to show cracks. The man's persistent documentation and strategic legal responses revealed inconsistencies and errors in their actions. These mistakes provided leverage, allowing his lawyer to challenge fines, halt proceedings, and demand proper adherence to procedures. Each correction, each acknowledgement of error, was a step toward restoring fairness and protecting the home he loved. During this time, the man also reflected on the broader meaning of his struggle. It was not just about a house. It was about justice, fairness, and standing up against those who abused power. The battle taught him patience, resilience, and the importance of meticulous preparation. It also deepened his understanding of the systems designed to protect citizens and the ways they can be misused, giving him insight and determination for future challenges. Despite the stress, he found moments of hope. Occasionally, letters from supportive neighbors or acknowledgments from authorities recognizing his deployment status reminded him that fairness was possible. These moments were small yet powerful, providing the motivation to continue the fight. They reaffirmed his belief that persistence, combined with knowledge and strategic action, could overcome even the most daunting obstacles. He continued balancing military life and the legal struggle, often juggling duties that demanded immediate attention with issues that required careful, methodical planning. The dual responsibilities were taxing, but they reinforced his resilience and resourcefulness. Each day became a test of endurance, focus, and problem-solving, skills he had honed through years of service. As the weeks turned into months, the man's confidence grew. He had developed a comprehensive strategy, a network of support, and a detailed record of evidence. The HOA's attempts to intimidate or overwhelm him were met with prepared responses, legal challenges, and unwavering determination. It was a battle of endurance, patience, and intellect, and he was fully committed to seeing it through. Through this struggle, he remained connected to the human side of the conflict. The emotional toll, the frustration, and the fear of loss were real, and he acknowledged them rather than suppressing them. This awareness allowed him to navigate the battle with clarity, compassion, and strategic thinking, balancing emotion with rational action. By the end of this phase, the man had gained not only legal ground but also personal insight. He had learned the importance of persistence, the value of support networks, and the power of knowledge. The battle was far from over, but he had established a strong foundation for the next steps. The house he had built, nurtured, and loved was worth every effort, and he was prepared to continue the fight until justice was fully realized. He knew that the story was far from over. The HOA's resistance would continue, and new challenges would arise, but he was ready. He had the tools, the support, and the unwavering commitment to reclaim his home. The lessons learned in this struggle were invaluable, preparing him for the eventual resolution and strengthening his resolve. He would not allow the place he had fought for to be taken unjustly. Each day, each action, each carefully documented response brought him closer to the justice he sought and the home he was determined to protect. The man's battle with the HOA had reached a critical point. Each day the tension grew as letters, fines, and threats continued to pour in. He had been relentless in his efforts, documenting every interaction, staying in constant touch with his lawyer, and coordinating with his friend back home. Yet the feeling of powerlessness lingered, the sense that despite his best efforts, The HOA's influence and the distance between him and home created a nearly insurmountable challenge. Then something unexpected happened. During a routine check-in with his commanding officer, he casually mentioned the situation. He did not expect much. After all, it was a personal matter. But his officer listened carefully, asked questions, and recognized the gravity of the situation. Being a deployed service member, facing the potential loss of his home due to unfair actions triggered attention. The military had protections in place for service members, and his case fell squarely into a scenario where intervention could make a difference. It started slowly. His commanding officer contacted the Legal Assistance Office, providing all documentation and explaining the unusual and urgent circumstances. The military lawyers reviewed the case, confirming that the man's rights as a service member were being violated. They agreed to intervene, using their authority to ensure that the HOA would comply with federal protections for deployed personnel. The man felt a wave of hope he had not experienced in months. Finally, there was support beyond his own efforts. The first step was formal communication with the HOA. The military lawyers sent letters on behalf of the deployed service member, outlining federal protections, deadlines, and potential consequences if the HOA continued their aggressive actions. The letters were clear, firm, and backed by authority that could not be easily dismissed. It was a turning point. For the first time, the HOA faced real accountability, and the balance of power began to shift. The HOA tried to resist at first, ignoring some notices and sending counter letters. But the military involvement changed the dynamic. Suddenly the stakes were higher, and their aggressive tactics were no longer safe. The organization realized that they were now under scrutiny, and that missteps could lead to significant consequences. This was a crucial moment where the tables had begun to turn, and the man's patience and persistence were starting to pay off. His friend back home continued to document everything meticulously. They attended meetings with the HOA, taking detailed notes, photographs, and recording instances of intimidation or misrepresentation. These records, combined with the military's authority, created an environment where the HOA had to reconsider their approach. The friend's dedication was a lifeline, bridging the gap between the man's distant efforts and the reality of what was happening at home. The man, meanwhile, felt a renewed sense of purpose. His days were still long and demanding, filled with military duties, but the hope that his home could be secured gave him energy and focus. He spent hours reviewing communications, coordinating with lawyers, and preparing for potential hearings or negotiations. The involvement of the military added weight to every action he took, making him feel that he was no longer fighting alone. Unexpectedly, the HOA began to show signs of weakness. Some members reached out privately, acknowledging mistakes and seeking resolution. They had underestimated the man's persistence and the seriousness of the military intervention. These discussions were delicate, requiring careful negotiation and clear communication. The man and his team remained firm but fair, making it clear that their goal was to protect the home and ensure compliance with the law, not to punish unnecessarily. Through these negotiations, the man learned more about the power of organization and authority. The HOA, despite its initial confidence, had limits when confronted with coordinated legal and military intervention. He realized that persistence, preparation, and support could shift even the most daunting situations. It was not just about legal knowledge, but about strategy, patience, and understanding the human and institutional dynamics at play. The military lawyers also provided guidance on next steps if the HOA continued to resist. Contingency plans were developed, including filing formal complaints, initiating investigations, and leveraging additional legal protections available to service members. Knowing there was a clear roadmap gave the man a sense of control and reduced the feeling of helplessness that had weighed on him for months. As progress continued, small victories accumulated. Certain fines were dismissed, aggressive notices were retracted, and the HOA began following proper procedures. The house itself remained intact, well maintained by the friend and untouched by the threats that had loomed for so long. The man felt a sense of relief, but he also knew the battle was not entirely over. Remaining vigilant was essential to ensure that the HOA could not reverse course or exploit loopholes. The process also had an emotional impact. Months of stress, frustration, and anxiety had taken their toll, But the involvement of the military brought reassurance and validation. The man realized that while the struggle had been exhausting, it had strengthened his resilience and his ability to handle complex problems. It was a lesson in endurance, perseverance, and the value of seeking support when facing seemingly insurmountable challenges. Neighbors began to notice the shift as well. The once quiet and tense interactions with the HOA turned into conversations about fairness, rules, and accountability. Some neighbors expressed admiration for the man's determination and the role the military had played in ensuring justice. The community dynamic subtly changed, reflecting the power of persistence combined with proper advocacy and support. The man also reflected on the irony of the situation. The very system he had served to protect now provided the means to protect his own home. It was a reminder of the broader purpose of the military and legal protections, and the importance of using them wisely and effectively. This perspective gave him both satisfaction and a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of service, law, and personal responsibility. As the days passed, the HOA's aggressive stance diminished. Letters became fewer and responses more compliant. The fear of legal and military consequences had altered their approach. The man's careful documentation, combined with the authority of the military lawyers, ensured that his rights were protected and that the house was secure. The shift from helplessness to empowerment was profound, and he could finally see the fruits of months of relentless effort. The friend continued to play a crucial role, ensuring that the house remained in excellent condition and that no further issues arose. Their dedication and attention to detail provided the man with peace of mind, knowing that while he was far away, his home was being cared for and defended. It was a partnership built on trust, loyalty, and shared commitment. In private moments, the man allowed himself to imagine returning home. He pictured unlocking the door, walking through the rooms, and seeing everything just as he had left it or better. The garden, the furniture, the walls, all preserved and intact. The thought of reclaiming his sanctuary, strengthened by the intervention and support, filled him with satisfaction and gratitude. Months of struggle were finally approaching a positive turning point. This phase of the battle taught him important lessons about patience, strategy, and the power of external support. It reinforced the idea that even when situations seem dire, persistence, organization, and the right allies can bring resolution. He had faced a seemingly insurmountable challenge and, through determination and proper intervention, had shifted the odds in his favor. The man knew the HOA had been warned, and any further missteps would be met with immediate consequences. The threat that had once loomed so large was now manageable, and the balance of power had clearly shifted. The house was safe, the fines were reduced or eliminated, and the HOA was on notice that their actions would be closely monitored. Through this journey, he also developed a sense of empowerment and understanding. He had learned to navigate complex systems, advocate for his rights, and persist in the face of adversity. These lessons would stay with him long after the immediate conflict was resolved, shaping his approach to challenges in all areas of life. As he prepared for the eventual return home, he felt a mixture of relief, satisfaction, and anticipation. The military support, the lawyer's guidance, and his friend's dedication had all combined to create a situation where justice could prevail. The house he had fought for, loved, and nurtured would remain his, a testament to his resilience and determination. Even as the conflict neared resolution, he remained vigilant. He continued documenting interactions, reviewing communications, and planning for any final steps required to ensure the HOA could not reverse course. This careful attention to detail reflected his understanding that the battle for justice often required constant awareness and proactive effort. In these moments, he reflected on the broader meaning of the struggle. It was more than a fight over property. It was a battle for fairness, respect, and the recognition of the sacrifices made by those who serve. The military's intervention had highlighted the importance of support systems and protections for service members, and he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the mechanisms in place to safeguard individuals in vulnerable positions. The turning of the tide was a powerful reminder that persistence,